Hey, what's up? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Now, getting a realistic acoustic instrument sound from a MIDI virtual instrument could be a little challenging at times. And so in this video, I want to walk you through a couple steps that you can do to get a realistic bass sound using a virtual bass instrument in your projects. So let me go ahead and play you a project that I'm currently working on and then walk you through a couple tips and tricks that can help you get a much better realistic vibe from your MIDI bass instrument.
Things you could be, keep denying yourself, but baby, you should know that's one way to die. Yeah. Feel how time warps in your hands. You never learned to dance, but you're in so deep you're sinking to the rhythm of your heart until you can't escape it. A slave to how the groove flows. You sway into the ordinary. Why?
Now, granted, the easiest way around this is just to record a real bass. Whether you play the bass yourself or you have a friend or know somebody or hire somebody to go and put the bass line in your project and slap the like button, that's all fine and dandy. That there you go, and you get a real bass part. But if you don't have access to a bass player or you just immediately want to incorporate a bass plugin like what we're doing now, there's a couple things I want to show you that can get the best all around results. Now in this project, I'm using the IK Multimedia Moto Bass plugin. Love this plugin. There's so many options within this plugin that you could utilize to tweak and change and really dial in to get the precise sound that you're looking for. But there's so many other great plugins out there as well that do the similar thing. And so we'll walk through how I use Moto Bass to get the sound I'm looking for, and then I'll go ahead and recreate the process using a stock Ableton Live bass patch. And so here in Moto Bass, you have the different articulation, finger, the picking, slap, or the different style that you're going to be playing. And starting with the actual model of the bass. So if you've seen any of my other videos on this channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of this. And from time to time in other type of videos, depending on the type of bass sound that I'm looking for, I've gone ahead and changed the actual model of the bass. Love using the violin bass and usually sticking around the 70s and 60s P bass and stuff like that. But here you can also navigate and change where you're actually plucking or strumming the string. You can move around and determine how much muting is happening, the different stroke. And so you got a lot of things under the hood that you can do to kind of change things around. You can also set the controls here to determine how realistic the bending from one note to another would be. You can determine how many notes in the range of sliding. So if you're not familiar with playing the bass, you would slide from one note on the fret to the other. And all that can be controlled here. You can assign your pitch wheel on your MIDI controller to determine the sliding from one note to the next. Here's where utilizing that pitch bend could be really helpful to create a nice, realistic slide. So we have this one note here, and I'm going to go to my envelope window, and we're just doing a pitch bend there, and that's what's going to cause that slide. And then you can determine the range of that slide. Is it going to go 8 semitones? So that's all determined here. And so you could really get very customizable type of responses with your MIDI device and how you want to control the performance or the actual tonality of the bass. So let's just put aside the actual plugin itself for a moment, because every virtual bass plugin will be different, but pretty much cover the same thing and give you a lot of options on how to change all the settings to get the sound that you're looking for. But it's mostly what's really important is the actual performance and the other things that go around creating a realistic vibe from your bass. So for instance, here what we have is the pattern. I'm going to solo the bass and I want to play you the pattern in the verse. And then pay attention to the pattern when it transitions to this section here. I'll color this region in green. So this is going to be the pre-chorus. So the rhythm is the same, but the notes that we're choosing in that rhythm are different. So it's adding some variation. And so that's a very key aspect to bringing life to your bass performance is adding variation. It could be easy to just duplicate this verse bass line, especially if it's going to go throughout the rest of the song, and just have that play over and over. But it's important that you go and take the time to change and add some variations in there. It's something that naturally a bass player would do. They would add runs or different ad libs and add some variations to their performance. So the rhythm stays the same, but then the note selection becomes different. So that's the number one key thing is adding small variations to your MIDI performance, and that can go a long way in creating a more realistic bass performance in your projects. Also, the next key thing is the velocity. Depending on the plugin, velocity will have a huge difference or the response in the notes themselves. So let's double click this and let's check this out. So here we have the difference in the velocity seen in the bottom. Now, velocity means it's how soft or hard the person is strumming that actual string. So the difference in having this velocity up actually changes the result of the sound that we're getting. Now, this could be very tricky if you're writing in your notes. If you're just double clicking and putting a note there, by default, these two velocities are going to be exactly the same. And so if you're drawing in your notes for your electric bass part, you will get a pretty stale and idle response. So you want to go in there and you want to just go ahead and maybe just play around with individual notes and change some of the dynamics overall by adjusting the velocity of each note. Also, another big thing is the timing. You notice that my bass notes aren't precisely on the grid. Here I have a little bit of space, so it's just a little bit behind. And I like the bass to be just a little bit behind the beat or the backbeat or the kick drum or something like that. So it once again, if you're drawing in your notes, it's pretty much going to snap to the grid that you're currently using. Be sure to select all your notes and just move them slightly off the grid. Or if you're playing them in by hand, don't use a quantize setting that's going to allow all the notes to snap 100% to the nearest grid setting or your quantize setting. Give a little bit of looseness there because a human playing the bass line isn't going to be a robot and be directly on the grid. So that's something that you want to definitely implement. The looseness where it's a little bit laid back or ahead of the beat depending on the style and what you're looking for, and then also the velocity. That's going to play a big role in getting the tone and the response that you want. Also, keep in mind that adding variations to this will also be a helpful way to create some life and momentum in the bass performance throughout this. Now, while we're on the subject, the pattern itself plays a big role. If we were just to have notes that are more sustained and the actual drum groove picks up a little bit, then it feels like the overall track will probably slow down. But if you want more movement, then you want to make sure that the patterns that you're creating are also helping the overall drum groove. So, for instance, let's go ahead and lengthen all these notes. I'm going to highlight them all and hit the legato button. And now what that's going to do is connect each end of the note to the next note. And so let's solo this. And let's go ahead and put that along with the drums. Now let's A-B that with the original pattern. So the length of note plays a big role. It's the staccato versus the legato. And it also is supporting the overall drum groove. Having this empty pocket here allows the drums to breathe. And so it's the bass line isn't so busy. Now, obviously, this is just going to come with practice if you're not familiar with how to structure these out. And so what I definitely recommend is that you listen or import, records that are similar to the style that you're going after or bass lines and slow them down and just get familiar with the pattern and the way that they are articulating that. Are some of the notes just whole notes? Are they long? Are they short? This is going to be really helpful for to just get more of a understanding of how to incorporate your MIDI notes to react more realistically. So those are a couple things with the notes that we can do. Now let's talk about the actual processing that we can apply to the bass to give a little bit more of that realistic feel as well. So if I go to the bass after the plugin, I have a compressor. And what I'm doing with this compressor in particularly is side chaining. And what this is going to allow to do is this is going to allow my kick drum to tell the bass to just get out of the way a little bit. And then that causes the bass to just duck. And then when the kick is done being played, the bass will breathe right back up. I like side chaining the bass for this purpose because then it creates that extra ducking or more with the pulse, and it's got more of that laid back. So on top of the MIDI notes already being a little bit hair behind the grid and the timing, this is also going to help accentuate that a little bit more. So let me play the bass without the sidechain, and we'll duplicate this, and here's a pattern. Now let's play with the sidechain. You can hear how it swells up a little. It's like, so it's just kind of sneaking in. And that's what I'm personally going for here. It created a much better feel for me. And so that's going to be all personal taste. If you want the swell to be a little less, then just bring the attack down, make it a quicker attack. If you want it to be a little bit more drastic, raise the attack up, make it a slower attack. So the goal here is really to capture the feel and the emotion of the bass performance. So let's try to recreate this whole process using a stock Ableton Live bass plugin. All right, so now I have a blank MIDI channel here, and I'm going to go to my instruments folder and look for the bass patch and an instrument under the bass and look for electric bass. Just click and drag that into this MIDI track. And let's just go ahead and play the same MIDI pattern that we have in the moto bass. You can see how the velocity here is affecting the bass articulation in the electric bass and Ableton patch differently than the moto bass. So that means I'm going to have to adjust the velocity a little bit here because we don't want that slap happening on certain notes. So what we can do is we can double click this and then go in and adjust some of the velocities of those notes that are being slapped. So those would probably be notes that are all the way at 127. That right there. And then just change the actual accent or the velocity of certain notes that are giving me the different response that I would normally get in the moto bass. So these two would have to go down. And then we can make some adjustments here. We can put the note off value. The dead note volume would actually be kind of like the muting. So if I wanted more of that. Now, if we wanted to bypass the velocity changes at all, you can set this macro here to just 0. And that means that there won't be any changes in the tonality or the dynamics of the performance, no matter how the velocities are adjusted. This will get rid of any surprises and slap notes and things like that, but then it becomes dull and it doesn't have the same type of life. So I would kind of keep it where it was, maybe 35%. You can kind of mess around with that and then go in and change some of the velocities like we just did. Now the tone of the bass is slightly different, and that's obvious because it's a different recorded bass altogether. So we can just grab the compressor, the sidechain compressor, and this EQ that I'm using, which is taking off some of the low, some of the high end, some of the low sub, and just a little bit of that low mid. I'm going to go ahead and copy these two. Just hold Shift, Option, and drag that to our regular electric bass patch. Now I'll play that with the drums.
Cool by myself, don't forget. I don't mind if I go out of style.
Now, the tone might be slightly off, but that's okay. That's something that an easy EQing and just taking time to kind of getting it right in the mix could help solve. But you notice the biggest difference was the actual performance, adjusting the velocity, making sure that the pattern was sitting right. And those are really the big pillars that make all the difference when trying to create a realistic bass line using virtual bass instruments. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was encouraging. I hope it was helpful in any way. And if you'd like to know more on how you could take your next step forward with producing your own music, definitely visit the website, beatacademy.com. It's where I focus a lot of my energy and time and pouring into those who are serious about taking their next step with their music. Also, for watching this video, I have a gift for you. I'd love to give you a sample pack loaded with construction kits, loops, one-shots, and sounds that are absolutely royalty-free so you can use them in your music and share that music with anyone you want. And it's yours absolutely free. So you can click the link below in the description box to download this today. Once again, thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe so you can stay up to date with upcoming videos. And I look forward to seeing you there. Take care.